If you're into diesel trucks, then you probably know all about Cummins. The 5.9 and the 6.7 Cummins that Dodge has been using over the last 3 decades have become absolutely legendary. They're both really solid engines with minimal downsides, but the question remains, which one is actually better? Today, let's dive in and find out. As you probably already know, the 6.7 Cummins ultimately replaced the 5.9 Cummins in 2007. This was after multiple revisions to the 5.9 Cummins, starting from the 12 valve in 1989 all the way up to the 24 valve ISB engine. 5.9 was never designed to work with modern emission systems, and although Cummins did an awesome job with every revision giving it more power and less emissions output, it ultimately just wasn't enough, and that's why the 6.7 had to come in and replace it. With the jump from the 5.9 Cummins to the 6.7 Cummins came an all-new architect, more displacement, an advanced turbocharger, an exhaust gas recirculation system, a diesel particulate filter, and a bunch of other very advanced features. Although the 6.7 was born from the need for better emissions, it also brought with it a huge power increase compared to the 5.9. To make things easy to understand in this video, we're mostly going to be talking about the 03 to 07 24 valve ISB engines and not the earlier 12 valve engines. Both the 5.9 and the 6.7 Cummins use a cast iron block and a cast iron head with 4 valves per cylinder, but that's basically where all the similarities end. The 6.7 has a larger stroke, bore, higher compression ratio, and like I said before, outputs way more power. Now, like I said earlier, the 5.9 was not designed to work with modern emission systems. After all, the original 5.9 was introduced in 1989, way before the clean diesel era. All the way up to the end of the 5.9's life, it didn't have any emissions components other than a catalytic converter. On the other hand, the 6.7 Cummins has an exhaust gas recirculation system known as an EGR and a diesel particulate filter, which is known as a DPF. Unfortunately, the EGR system is known for sticking and clogging EGR coolers, and it does reduce overall reliability of the 6.7. Now, with those emission systems reducing overall reliability, a lot of 6.7 Cummins owners delete these emission systems. However, you need to tread lightly doing this because it's not exactly legal and you can get hit with a very hefty fine. It's not something I recommend doing unless you really don't care about getting caught or the massive fine that comes along with it. Now, as far as fueling, both the 5.9 and the 6.7 Cummins use a similar common rail injection system, and they both use a Bosch CP3 injection pump. There are rumors that the 6.7's CP3 injection pump is better than the 5.9's. However, according to Bosch's data, they flow the same amount of fuel. Again, this is ignoring the earlier 12 valve engines, which use a mechanical injection system. It should be noted that the fuel rail feed lines, injector lines, and crossover tubes on the 6.7 Cummins measure 50% larger than they do on the 5.9 Cummins. Because the 6.7 injection system operates at a slightly higher pressure than the 5.9, a pressure relief valve with an additional 3,000 psi rating is used. Now, the injectors of each engine are similar in physical size. However, the 6.7's injectors are rated for higher pressure and require less voltage to operate. Unfortunately, on the 6.7, the injectors are programmed to the ECU, and you can't just swap injectors around like you could on the 5.9. Other than that, the fueling systems are pretty similar. Of course, the pistons are a little bit different on each engine because of these small differences in the fuel systems. When the 6.7 Cummins was released, one of the most notable features of it was the new variable geometry turbocharger. A variable turbo is something that the competition had already been using for a number of years, but it's something that the 5.9 Cummins never got. The 5.9 always had a fixed geometry turbocharger, which was fine when the 5.9 was initially released, but the benefits of a variable geometry turbocharger are well worth it, and Cummins had to keep up with the competition, so it's ultimately a feature that the 6.7 ended up getting. The variable turbo gives the 6.7 Cummins a lot of low-end torque, a lot of top-end power, and really good throttle response. This system works by giving the exhaust housing of the turbocharger electronically controlled vanes, which allow it to effectively change the size of the housing. Changing the size of the housing results in different exhaust gas velocity. To put it simply, at low RPM, the housing decreases its effective size, and at high RPM, it increases its effective size. Although variable geometry turbochargers are very nice, they are less reliable than a fixed geometry turbocharger. While stuck vanes are common on the variable turbochargers on Power Stroke and Duramax engines, the 6.7 Cummins struggled with actuator failure. On top of that, if you add more fueling to crank up the power, the extreme shaft speed and excessive pressure on the exhaust side of the variable turbo can quickly become a ticking time bomb. With the variable turbocharger on the 6.7 comes the ability to exhaust brake, which isn't something a diesel can normally do because of the lack lack of throttle bodies, which means that there isn't a pumping loss to retard the engine. Exhaust braking is an awesome feature to have when you're towing, and it massively improves the capability of the truck. As far as common issues, the 6.7 had to deal with the emission systems, as I said earlier. The 6.7 also has to deal with more boost pressure at low RPMs thanks to the variable turbo. With more stroke and higher boost at lower RPMs, the 6.7 has more head gasket failures than the 5.9 ever did. And that's not to say that the 6.7 blows head gaskets like crazy, because it doesn't, but it is more common on the 6.7 than it is on the 5.9. Other than that, both of these engines are very reliable and known to last a long time. When it comes to performance, both of these engines have massive potential, as I'm sure you know. Both of them are capable of making over 1,000 foot-pounds of torque. In fact, the newest 6.7 Cummins makes 1,000 foot-pounds of torque straight from the factory. For those who want big power out of their engine, the Siamese bore design on the 6.7 is a bit stronger and a bit more favorable. The Siamese bore design just entails a lack of coolant channels in between cylinders, which improves cylinder stability, and it's overall a stronger design. At the peak of diesel racing, the 6.7 is a preferred engine for many racers. Many of the top racers in truck pulling and drag racing take a 6.7, add sleeves to the cylinders, a deck plate up top, and increase the stroke of the crank. 6.7 blocks treated to this kind of machining end up around 390 cubic inches of total displacement and can easily produce anywhere between 1,800 and 3,000 horsepower very reliably. Now, back to the original question of which one is better, it kind of just comes down to what your use case is. The 5.9 is a little bit more reliable thanks to its lack of emissions components and no variable turbocharger, but the lower displacement and fixed geometry turbocharger kind of limit performance. Now, the 6.7 has more displacement and a larger variable turbocharger, allowing it to perform much better, but the emissions components do give it less reliability. If you care more about reliability, the 5.9 is the better engine. However, if reliability isn't as absolutely important and you're more interested in making a lot of power, the 6.7 is the better engine. Of course, this is completely omitting the earlier 12-valve engines, which are super reliable with their fully mechanical fuel system. Now, of course, both of these engines are really awesome, and with the right modifications, both of them can make a ton of power and be super reliable. Really, there's no wrong answer here. But I want to know what you guys think. Do you think the 5.9 is better, or do you think the 6.7 is better? Let me know down in the comments below. Be sure to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.